All right, I think we're live.
How
So,
exciting.
yay. Thank you, Kathleen, for coming on. I know you just got back from a trip to Ireland, right?
Yes. First time.
Photos were beautiful from what I've seen.
Yeah, it was a beautiful country with lots of welcoming faces and wonderful conversations.
Very cool. So welcome everybody to Coffee Talk. And we were going to maybe chat about ways we squash empowerment because Kathleen is working on a TED Talk. How exciting.
Yes.
Very cool.
Yeah, I am. The more I kind of play with it, and there's so many things, there's so many ideas that as a humanoid, just like, oh, there's this idea, oh, there's that idea. So it's just like honing it down, because when you get ready to do a bigger talk like that, you're supposed to have it all like practiced ahead of time and all, which is not what my typical way, of approaching an audience, And I was a teacher for more than 25 years, and I'm used to like being spontaneous with certain things, but it does make sense to have certain things practiced and ideas in your head, so you're not up there going like,
Right. I don't know, just the idea, like, I think it's so cool to do a TED Talk, but it leaves me in a little bit of a beyond to consider myself choosing that. So how did you get there?
Well, for me, I knew that some of the more typical routes with being an access facilitator weren't necessarily what I was choosing. And I knew that the times that I had like spoken at Body, Mind, Spirit expos or spoken to small groups, like here in Florida, a group asked me to come and speak, the IONS group, that is what I really enjoy to a large degree. Yes, the body work is great. I just enjoy that. And marketing is not necessarily my my high point in terms of, there's so many CF facilitators around the world doing so many cool things, and they have all this great marketing stuff in place. I don't want to make myself wrong about any of that, but instead, there was a chance to join in this group where you get trained for doing a TED Talk.
Wow.
So I'm like, okay, I'll give that, a shot of like, I'm paying somebody essentially to train me for how to do it and going in that route, because I'm really eager, especially on the topic of youth empowerment. But like you said, I used to have a radio show called Growing Up Conscious, and I would say whether you're age 1 or age 75, everyone is working on their consciousness. Yes.
Yeah. I was just listening to something the other day. It was an old recording of something. And I think I mentioned this yesterday on my 30 by 30. But Simone said, Gary started Access Consciousness at age 51. So, yeah. Like you can choose at any point. And even like my great aunt, I think she started a career in marriage and family counseling in her 50s. Like she went and got her degree then after she had her family.
Trying to remember what age I was when I found out about Access. I've been a facilitator on and off for more than 10 years now. So I guess it would have been my late 40s or 50s as well,
Yeah.
And it's one of those things where you have to keep changing, right? Because when I started Access Consciousness, Facebook was such an easy way to let people know what was going on. So I remember hosting Casey Crisp for a body class, and like 15 people showed up, and just by like telling them about it on Facebook and spreading the word. And it's different now, there's lots of other ways to invite people. But at least for me, Facebook is not really the way anymore. So I was just looking at ways to reach people that, for one, haven't necessarily heard about the tools yet. And for two, to address that piece about, because when I look at the stats around how many kids are getting diagnosed with anxiety and depression, suicidal, and my second son at certain points in his life, getting through high school made him suicidal.
Oh my God.
Public high school is like, just my experience with him. And also I worked 1 year in my career in special education in high school. And I'm like, this would make me suicidal. I mean, probably not.
We all
me,
probably have a mild case of that. Like, oh my God, get me away from here. I don't want to be here. Like, that's a mild form of.
I had fun in high school, but it's because I didn't realize at the time, but I just didn't buy into the reality of being popular. I hung out with the quirky kids. I had a lot of fun. I wasn't into like, drinking or drugs or any of that would kind of distract my joy at that time. And so, yes, I still, was affected by people that were judgmental, but for the most part, not,
Yeah. Yeah.
And back then you could get a D. I remember I was already accepted into college in my senior year, and I was not thrilled with my trigonometry teacher. So I ended up with 2 Ds in my senior year, but it didn't matter because I was already accepted into college, which they don't allow for the most part anymore in traditional colleges. And I'm like, too bad,
Now, like, you have to get more than an A. Like, there's higher than a 4.0.
I know, it's crazy.
I'm like, how is that possible? I thought 4.0 was it. No, you can have a 4.2. You can have a 4.5. What?
Yeah. Yes. I had this great conversation with this woman in Ireland who worked she was dressed to the nines. She was just beautiful, and she was working in this gift shop. And for many years, she worked like in high-end fashion or something. And she said, after seeing what my kids have gone through and seeing what people do to get themselves through college and then get those high-end jobs, and then they're miserable, it's like, what's the point? And I even look at my 2 sons, my older son, it was much easier for him to do school. And right now he's in medical school, and he's working his butt off to keep straight A's so that he can be competitive, Where my second, and he has this huge debt that he's going to have to pay off when he gets out, right? And I'm sure he'll be able to do it. But then there's my second son who really struggled through high school, not because of his IQ, but his awareness, He went to community college, he went to regular college for a while. He was bored, he dropped out, but he's now part of a business where if they sold it, he'd probably make $1 million, and there's no right way to do it, but we're told so often that there is,
Yeah. Fitting into the mold. Yeah. And this will go on your permanent record. Like,
yes.
What the hell?
Yeah, I mean, my second son reminded me, and I even, because I work with a lot of students one-on-one by Zoom still, supporting them with their schoolwork. And, my second son reminded me, hey, middle school grades don't count, Mom. He kind of knew how the system worked. And I talked to one of my middle school students that I was working with, and he goes, well, I don't know about that. I got this thing in the mail that says if I keep my grades up for middle school and high school, then I might get a scholarship. And I'm going like, but I can't say that because, you can't ruin your life with trying to get everything perfect that way,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so have you narrowed down some of your ways that people disempower or squash empowerment?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, one of the primary ways for me, now that I live in Florida and I swim in the ocean almost every day, or at least walk along the ocean every day, which I really love, is that we don't teach people at an early age that their primary partner is their body. And being in communication with your body and honoring your body and treating it with high regard is not something that's part of the typical American culture, at least. And in school especially, I remember those kindergarten students coming in and looking at what they had to do to fit into school, and I'd find so many kids crying, and like just working with them to expand out their energy, like it's okay, like they have to leave this kind of safer space of home and fit in at school where they have routines, tell you when to eat, tell you when to move, tell you when to sit, and it just, we disempower and squash empowerment through not honoring the body and treating the body with the full regard that it deserves, for lack of a better way to put it. So that's definitely one. And another,
that is just so great. Like, yeah. Can you just imagine all the kids having that?
Yeah.
Access kids have it, which is awesome, but like, wouldn't it just be nice if every kid could have that?
Yes. Yes. I know somebody right now. I met his grandkids, and they're able to do homeschooling so far because their mom works mostly in massage and their grandma watches them when she's working. And the joy, like the older one who's so like verbal, and she's not even reading yet, but she learns all this stuff by video, and she's just talking about animals, and she just has like so much joy in her learning too. But she has all this flexibility to be like doing that and then switching off of that and doing something else, like let's do bowling in the hallway, and just seeing something different that way, where she doesn't have to be, because she's the first grade age, she's supposed to be in school, she's supposed to be reading this, And so I guess that's the second way that we squash empowerment, is like all the rules around who's the expert on how should be, where you should be putting your attention, where you should be, what you should be learning about. Like in a traditional public school setting, you don't have much choice. It's like, here's your math block, here's your reading block, here's your writing block. It depends on the school, because when some schools, before like the more structured curriculum came in, where everybody's supposed to be doing the same thing, you had some say, like my sons went to private school for a while when they were young. And let's say they were looking at studying the rainforest, they could do reading, writing, and math all related to the rainforest. And that just makes sense, because that's what you're going into depth with at that time. Where in traditional public school, it's like the reading, the writing, the math tend to be separate from each other, and tend to be like, what is next in the curriculum book that we have to check off? Okay, we're doing expository writing this week. We're doing this kind of writing this week, And it doesn't focus on the strengths of the kid and the curiosities of people. So whether you're a kid or an adult, because I recall this one woman I worked with, who was a speech language pathologist, and she was really gifted with kids that had the label autism, and teaching them about social skills and how to bring out their strengths and how to work with the teacher and bringing out their strengths. And I asked the administrators in our district, it's like, this woman is really gifted with this. Can she just do that? Because so much of her day was paperwork, special ed paperwork, or working with kids on how they say their R's, because she's a speech language therapist, which a lot of people can do that. A lot of people can teach kids how to say their R's, right? Where she was gifted with working with kids in a way that just changed their life and made it easier for the whole community, right? But the district was like, no, she needs to do the paperwork. She needs to work with, so whether you're a kid or an adult, like, how can you really put your emphasis on your strengths?
It's easy and fun for you. Yeah.
Yes.
My kids went to Montessori school, and it was small enough that all the kids were together from grade 1 to grade 6. And they'd all meet up together, and like if one kid fell and hurt themselves on the playground, then the older ones would take care of the younger ones. It was really sweet. But they would play music, and you could break out into groups, and you could do the work that was interesting to you, and you could go as far as you wanted to go in that subject. So there were very loose lines. And it was actually a Montessori teacher training by Maria Montessori's son, who created that school. And it was just really cool to give them a basis in that, and where they went with it, and how they how they do their homework. Oh my God, my son will have a video on headsets listening to music and doing his math all at the same time, because he needs that multiple stimulation or it's too boring and he
Yes.
can't concentrate. And I'm like, wow, like what an amazing what an amazing ability.
Yes, I agree. I mean, my sons
They've
were
got to find
also,
their way. Yeah.
when they were younger, my sons also were in a private school for a while. And it was so interesting to see when they shifted back to public school. For my younger son, it was 5th grade. My older son, it was high school, I guess. How all of a sudden they took on this like herd mentality, like, oh no, I can't wear that to school. Oh no, I can't do that. I can't do that. Like right away, they were like super aware of what they were wearing, what they could say, what they couldn't say when they moved back into, and I'm not saying it's a bad thing about public school, but it's just bigger groups of people and outside of a community, and then it gets into all these things about what's cool and what's not cool and which group you're in and which group you're not in. So yeah, it's fascinating that way. And of course, the other thing that I wish I would have learned much younger was that whole tool of who does this belong to, and not making your thoughts, feelings, emotions, and labels and words significant. When I worked for 1 year in high school, there's quite a few kids who were like, well, I have an anxiety disorder. And then that became so solid, right? And it actually was one way they coped with how you get through a public school system, is be like, no, I can't do that because I have an anxiety disorder. And there's nothing wrong with it, using it to cope and to do what's required. So like if they could use it to their advantage, great. But I also saw how they like shrunk themselves down to, I have anxiety, so therefore I can only do XYZ. And defining that and solidifying that in their world, instead of like, oh, what is this energy I'm feeling and what can I do with it? And how can I outcreate even when I'm sensing something that seems like anxiety? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So we come up with limiting kind of labels and making things significant. Like labels, like I said, can be useful in terms of how do you get through public school, but then if they are conscious enough to know, how can I use this label to my advantage, instead of how can I shrink myself down into my disorder,
The stories we tell ourselves. Yeah.
Yeah, this might not seem related, but when I was in Ireland, I went into some really beautiful churches and cathedrals, right? And I grew up Catholic. But it was the first time when I saw the Stations of the Cross, I don't know if you know what that is, that I'm like, oh my gosh, this is taking a very sad story and like making each part of it very significant, And I saw it in a whole different way. Like, where do we do that in our lives? Like we break down painful things that happened to us and like relive them. And, so again, that's another way we kind of squash empowerment, instead of like, when I heard Gary Douglas say, 10 seconds after something happens, it's a story. So is it an empowering story that we'd like to keep telling because it inspires you and gets you excited about what you're creating? Or is it something that disempowers you and keeps you from what you can actually create?
That's a good one. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. And it's interesting that you bring up the thing with the Stations of the Cross, because I went to this Chinese medicine guy last week, and he was like, Jesus like was impervious to all of this stuff, and he had no judgment of what was happening, and he wasn't at the effect of it. So it's like, wow, if you take that and apply it to each of those things, it's like, okay, this happened, but it didn't hurt me. And, he lived afterwards. And it's like the consciousness is never tarnished.
Yes.
And
And he
so,
supposedly, he said, everything I can do, you can do and more as well,
yeah.
So
And
he was
so if
there
you
to empower.
exactly. And if you can like tap into that energy of, it's like total allowance and total bliss, ecstasy, an interesting point of view, just interesting point of view.
And living beyond this reality. Yes, like showing that something else is possible.
Yeah. So, yeah, I don't know a whole lot about that. My family was not religious and they were Jewish, so I didn't really learn a whole lot.
I just remember daydreaming a lot when I was in church, but because you're, as a Catholic, you have to sit down, you have to kneel, you have to sit down, you stand up, you have to know when to do the right movement at the right time.
I just like looking at the stained glass windows.
Yes. Oh, yes.
And the beauty. I mean, it's so beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah. And that aspect too of where I've just noticed a lot lately around where we make somebody else outside of ourselves the expert person. Not that we can't learn from others and be empowered with others, but instead, like catching where I say I don't know and be like, oh, wonder why I said that, and then be like, what am I aware of here?
What do you know that you don't think you know, that if you would allow yourself to know it, would reveal it to you?
Yes. Well, I think of the times even where like there's some kind of altercation at recess, right? So they come in to talk to, the principal or the teacher. And usually we go into why questions, like, why did you do that? Which is like a ridiculous thing to ask after a kid has hit another kid on the playground. It's like talking about the why is just going to keep the story going, right? Instead of like, oh, what did that create? What were you aware of? Like really getting them in a different direction, or like, I wonder what you can choose next time when this comes up to you, yeah.
So oh my goodness, it would be such a different place with access tools on the playground.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, even just allowing kids some space to themselves during the day. I don't know how it would be possible in a school, or even outside of school, because everything is so scheduled, but like having some space to themselves so they can just be aware of who they are and what they're desiring.
Well, I imagine like you don't have to be alone and you don't have to be in nature, although that's, easier, but you could do an expanding exercise. Like, wouldn't it be nice if when you got to school, the teacher did an expanding exercise? It took 2 minutes.
Yeah.
Said, relax, expand out, throughout the whole universe. And now let's start our day. Like, it would just make everything so much easier.
Yes. Yes. And adding in like all of life comes to us with ease, joy, and glory. What would you like to create today after you expand out, right.
Yeah.
That's what I do when I walk along the beach in the morning, is just get into that space. Ease, joy, and glory. And what would I like to choose and create today?
Yeah. I mean, that's so amazingly nurturing. And for the people that live in cities or don't have access to nature that easily, you can have a cute little plant but you can expand wherever and have your space.
That's true. That's true. It's certainly possible. And yeah, there could be somebody really close to you and you can still then expand out peace that way. And then of course, I don't want to forget that the access body processes are the ones I'm most aware of. I also trained in the body talk system. So it doesn't have to be just the access body processes, but all the different energetic ways that we can clear. If kids know about who does this belong to, and kids and adults, of course, you're using who does this belong to? Is this mine or somebody else's? But then also all the cool ways that you can clear your body and clear your beliefs, I think are huge in terms of consciousness empowerment.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Because there's been more than once that I've been stuck on something. And even if somebody runs my implant bands for 15 minutes, I'm like, oh, okay. I'm grateful my next door neighbor took a bars class because, we'll like ring each other back and forth. 20 minutes, just do 20 minutes for right now. And, it'll shift my day,
It is so true. It's such a simple thing. And, we can reach up and do our own.
Yes.
It's so nice to have somebody else so that you can totally relax and receive. And it breaks that cycle. Part of it, I think, is also just the negative self-talk that so many people do. That's what makes you feel heavy and compressed. And it's like, if you can recognize that you are choosing to create this negative self-talk and to actually contract your energy, you can see that, and then you can choose to not do that. Reverse it, like, even if you don't know how, you could ask, what would it take to reverse this? What would it take to stop doing the negative self-talk? And then things lighten up. It's amazing how much we do go automatically to that when something comes up, or when, you're in a new school or a new environment or something, we go, instead of, like, if we could just change that reaction into the choice to expand, I wonder what would be created.
Yeah, certainly going through quite a few airports recently. It's the same kind of thing. Like, you're in the airport, you have to remember to expand out and stay expanded out and keep asking questions. And every time you run into like a little glitch, be like, okay, this doesn't mean it's going to be a bad trip. It's kind of like, how's it getting better? And just keeping that expansive space that allows possibilities.
Talk about anxiety. Sometimes when I'm driving to the airport, I all of a sudden get all this anxiety awareness, and I'm like, wow, okay, none of it's mine. I'm just aware. And there's a lot of people who have that when they go to the airport or when they think about flying.
Yeah. And I think that's part of what kids are aware of when they start school too. And why, there's so many kindergarten kids that are transitioning from this home space to school space and are like, oh, and other kids are thrilled and excited, so it's not only that, it's both.
Get me out of, yeah. I need some new stimulation.
Yeah, there's this one boy in kindergarten, he just happened to be bigger than other kids. He was African American, and I never met his dad, but his mom was pretty tall. And so even sitting in circle like you were supposed to, he would bump into kids all the time. He was just like, and then he'd be getting in trouble, and he'd be like, I didn't mean to bump into you, and then he got this label. So it's like he looked different than a lot of the kids in the class because it was primarily very Caucasian class, and so he looked a little bit different, and he was bigger, and he came from a slightly different culture, and then he comes to school and he's just like, instead of just like celebrating wow, look at how big you are. Like, oops, you bumped into the person next to you. Oh, what, let's give you a little bit more space, Yeah.
And everybody's so different. We're like a million colors of a box of crayons,
Yes.
Everybody is so different, even twins. Like,
Yes.
what would it take to just be able to acknowledge and be the difference?
Right. And celebrate, like I said, that our strengths and our the things that not making our strongness a wrongness, as they say. Yeah.
Wow, it's already 10 o'clock here. So I've got to scoot on over to my other group and do an
Yes.
expanding exercise, but thank you so much and really good luck on doing the TED Talk and getting out there. I can't wait to hear it.
Thank you, Julie. And being that I'm wearing your jewelry, I just want to again give you a plug for the wonderful jewelry that's a contribution to me and my body.
Aw, thank you.
Yeah,
Your
for the sparkle.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.
Yeah.